Hey, today's episode is brought to you by Sunset Lake CBD. We've talked about Sunset Lake CBD quite a bit around here. We are all big fans of their various products. You'll recall they are a farm located outside of Burlington, Vermont. They used to exclusively be a dairy farm for Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They decided to diversify. They work with the University of Vermont, which is apparently one of the foremost, academic researches about CBD growing. Their hemp is 100% pesticide free. They only use organic fertilizers. You can look at their the third-party analysis of what they sell on their website. They have great business practices, $15 a minimum wage, and employees own a majority of the company. But best of all, their products are awesome. As far as I know, we were all CBD skeptics around here. I am now a regular user of various tinctures that they have. They get the 750 mil. They got the 1500. Now they got a 3000 milliliter. You can't find that. I've never found that before. Helps me go to sleep in situations where I don't want to get angry at my children because they drive me crazy. Sometimes I'll take a little bit. They have gummy bears if you want that are CBD gummy bears. They have this amazing topical salve that has beeswax in it and arnica and 500 meg of CBD, and I use it on my eczema. That some people have not had the same success on their eczema, but everybody who has used it has told me that it's great for like their arthritis or they had problems with their back. There's also a great farmer's roast CBD coffee. That's my weekend brew. Take the edge off a little bit, but still get my caffeine fix. And their smokables are awesome. I'm actually starting to get into, I got to be careful because I don't want to ever fall back into like the cigarette thing. But I tried the pre-rolls and it's a nice, like, it's a body buzz, I guess. Not so much none of the sort of the psychedelic quality of it. And Matt, you're a huge fan, right?
I'm a big fan of the smalls too, but that's good because I feel like a pre-rolled CBD joint is much better for you than a cigarette. So maybe that's.
Oh, definitely. Well, I don't smoke cigarettes anymore. I just don't I don't want to get back into that mindset, if you will. But it's nice. I just take a couple of drags of it and it's a great way to relax your body. And the best is, they're fans of the show, and they're giving us 20% off for anybody who uses the coupon code LEFTISBEST. One word, left is best. 20% off at sunsetlakecbd.com. Sunsetlakecbd.com. Start the show.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Cedar.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Cedar.
Ever get the feeling you've been cheated?
It is Tuesday, September 15th, 2020. My name is Sam Cedar. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps and steps and steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Baffler co-founder, author of What's the Matter with Kansas, Thomas Frank on his latest, The People Know, N-O, A Brief History of Populism. Meanwhile, Wisconsin State Supreme Court says ballots can be mailed, I should say, now. In Pennsylvania, ballots are on hold, tied up in court. Meanwhile, scientists fear that two of the most important Arctic glaciers in the world are tearing loose. Going to raise sea levels dramatically. Different federal courts or I should say, a federal court rules that Chad Wolf is illegally serving as DHS head and blocks temporarily some of his asylum restrictions. Meanwhile, a different federal court says that Trump can throw thousands of refugees who have been here for decades out of the country, tearing them apart from about 250,000 U.S. citizens, family members. Whistleblower tells of COVID run rampant at for-profit immigration detention centers, private prisons, basically. And there are hints of mass hysterectomies. From the administration to the right-wing fever swamps, calls for and about armed revolt. We are 7 weeks out from the election. All this and more on today's program. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us. Sorry, we're having a little bit of technical difficulties with the audio mix up front. We are working right now, and by we, of course, I mean Kyle, are working on a wholly new system, one which Kyle owes it to the world to release to the broader public, I think. But Kyle is working on something that is going to upgrade the quality of our audio, upgrade the quality of our video, upgrade just all sorts of upgrades. So we're very much anticipating that. It's exciting. We're trucking along here on the program, trying to get it all done. Still in many ways catching our breath from both the idea of moving all remote and frankly, from Michael's loss. And so we appreciate when you bear with us when we have technical issues and when we, this week in particular, Brendan is out. And so it's, we're a little bit under the gun, but we will endeavor to persevere. We have 7 weeks until the election. Obviously, we have a lot of election news. There's a lot of anxiety going around. There's a lot of insanity on the right. All this and more, we will be here every day until the election, except for, of course, on weekends. Then we still haven't figured out what we're going to do for the election. Originally, we were going to, it's the 10-year anniversary of this program. We were going to do an all-day thing. Maybe I'll talk about this tomorrow because we've got a news day tomorrow. But just a reminder, you can support this program by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. When you do, we cut out all the commercials, incidentally. Getting a decent amount of ads these days towards the end of the year of Q4, an election year, and with, more online stuff. So that's a little bit helpful. Meanwhile, the latest and maybe the last audio drop from from Bob Woodward's monetization tour. Here is the last conversation that he had with Donald Trump. This was in April. Now, can you just imagine that? Okay, he's wrapped everything up. Even if in April he had let the public know about the conversations he had in February, that would have made a difference. If it makes a difference today, it would have made a difference in terms of thousands of lives before. Nevertheless, here is the conversation, the last conversation Bob Woodward had with Donald Trump, talking about COVID.
This thing is a killer if it gets you. If you're the wrong person, you don't have a chance.
Yes, exactly. This is a monster. This is a scourge. And
it is the plague. And Bob, it's so easily transmissible, you wouldn't even believe it.
I know.
I mean, you can be in the room. I was in the White House a couple of days ago, a meeting of 10 people in the Oval Office, and a guy sneezed innocently, not a horrible, just a sneeze. The entire room bailed out, okay, including me, by the way.
There you go. That's an April 13th. He's bailing out of a meeting because somebody sneezed innocently. Let's look at what he was saying at that time. This is his Twitter. Here it is. On April 17th, right? On April 13th, he's saying this thing is a plague. You'll bail out. This thing will kill you. If you're the wrong person, you don't have a chance. I bailed out when someone sneezed. 4 days later, here he is saying, liberate Virginia and save your Second Amendment. It's under siege. Liberate Michigan. Liberate Minnesota. In other words, stop actually being suppressed by this fake coronavirus hoax. This is the message he's putting out there 4 days after he said this. And now remember, if he had said what he said in February 7th, and then on April 13th, he had said, instead of saying it April 13th, he had said it on February 8th, you would see a consistency on his attitude towards this whole thing. And then just compare all his comments from February 7th to April 17th. Then he wasn't, he's an idiot, but he's not an idiot about this. He knows. He's just like the rest of the lives that we would spare. They're not my life. I think that's pretty poignant. From February 7th to April 13th, that guy's perspective on this didn't seem to change an iota privately. And it didn't seem to change an iota publicly either, frankly.
Psycho, you're talking about fleeing the room, and this is the attitude you've had publicly towards the coronavirus?
Through February, through March, into April. For 2.5 months. When literally tens of thousands of people have died. That's pretty stunning. I imagine that will in some way impact him going forward. All right, we got a couple ads before we get to Thomas Frank. I'm very excited to see him. As you know, folks, I am a little sartorially challenged. It's hard to buy clothes online in particular because you don't know if your size is what you want. Well, for me, one of my solutions has been Stitch Fix. It's a personal styling company that makes getting the clothes you love effortless. It's a completely different way to shop. It's about you every time. To get started, this is what you do. You go to stitchfix.com/majority. You set up your profile. They ask you what kind of clothes you like. And, dumpy is not a choice. So I had to actually get more specific with my clothing choices. But they ask you what brands you wear, what colors you like, what styles. And then you pay a $20 styling fee for each fix, and that's credited towards anything that you keep. You can schedule at any time. There's no subscription required. And what they do is they send you a bunch of clothes based upon your selections. Shipping, returns, exchanges, super easy, super free. They do the hard work for you. For me, I've gotten 2 articles of clothing that have become sort of, staples of mine, I would say. One is the Chukka boots. I don't think they're called Chukka. They're Chuka or Chukka, whatever. Brendan knows what they are, how they're pronounced. But they're basically like desert boots. But I wear these. These are my sort of like when I want to go out and, pretend like I'm an adult. I wear these boot shoes, and they're great. And then I have the Flag and Anthem. It's sort of like a jean pants, but it's a little bit more, a little classier than jeans, but they fit in the same way. And they fit. You can check it out. You can get started today at stitchfix.com/majority. You get 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. That's stitchfix.com/majority for 25% off when you keep everything in your fix. stitchfix.com/majority. And folks, it's very difficult to, these days to sort of figure out how you can interact with people without it being a screen. Well, one of my solutions, at least with my child, anyways, and by child, I mean, she's, a teenager. She's a grown person. The way she talks is sometimes a little bit disturbing. But Hunt a Killer is a new game, a new way to do game night. It gives you the opportunity to have fun, work together, investigate a crime, without ever having to leave the house. Hunt to Killer reinvents the way we interact with murder mysteries. So you're not sitting on your couch watching True Detective on HBO or whatever it is, or listening to some podcast about a murder. You become an investigator. It's like a murder mystery subscription box. It has over 2,000 5-star reviews on Trustpilot. What happens is they send you a new box each month. You have documents in there, evidence. Sometimes it's audio recordings that they put on a little thumb drive. There's case files, pictures. And you use all this to crack the case. They even have like a spoiler-free online community if you want to go there. I will not allow Mila to do that because we must discuss it. That's the whole point. I know there's other people who do it a different way, but it's been great. It's a great way to connect with people. In my experience, it's also a great way to get your kid off of a device. She came to me and she's like, I'm obsessed with the Law and Order, that Dick Wolf show. And I didn't have the heart to say, like, really? But I mean, I guess people like that. I don't know. But, and when I told her we could get this, she was super psyched. And so it's been fun. We had our bulletin board too going for a while. Right now, you know, the one with the strings. Right now, just for our listeners, you can go to hunttokiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout for 20% off your first box. Head to hunttokiller.com/majority for 20% off. Show your support for our podcast. That's hunttokiller.com/majority. All right. Again, we will put links to all of our ads in our podcast description and our YouTube description. And if you are a member of the show, you'll hear my voice now because we just cut out the commercials for you. But if you guys, members, want to see what deals we have for stuff, make sure you always check out the podcast description, YouTube description. You can get those deals. And now it is my pleasure to welcome back to the show. And by welcome back to the show, well, by to the show, I mean every iteration of this program over the course of 16 years now. Holy crap. It's my pleasure to welcome the co-founder of the Baffler magazine, author of What's the Matter with Kansas, Wrecking Crew, Listen Liberal, and his latest, The People Know, A Brief History of Populism. Thomas Frank, welcome back to the program.
So it looks like he's still kind of connecting. I'm not sure if we can... Oh, here we go.
Thomas, are you there?
I'm here.
There we go.
Can you see me?
We cannot see you.
Okay.
Well, I can see you now. How's it going? We can see you.
Thomas, Mr. Sam Cedar.
Welcome back to the program. It's great to see you.
Yeah. Hey, it's been a while. How are you?
It has been a while, but I was just saying that I think the first time that we spoke was 16 years ago with What's the Matter with Kansas on
yes,
on a different iteration of this program.
Yes, and a different iteration of my one idea that I have, been obsessively hitting again all my life.
Well, to
no avail. I
was gonna say, it's tough when I have moments where I'm like 16 years, and I gotta say, net, I don't see things necessary.
You don't see a win for Kid Frank.
Well, I mean, you and me both. But I do. Let me put it this way, and I hate to use this is I use this term only facetiously, but the sentiment's true. I do see some green shoots. Let's put it that way.
Oh, stop it!
But we'll get to that in a moment.
Wasn't that what Larry Summers said about the economy?
It was like Larry Summers,
2009, or something.
And we see that with Kudlow too. Said,
oh my God!
But
Kudlow,
All right. Well, let's talk about. Let's get into the history, and then I want to talk about the broader take, because in some respects, you have been making this argument for at least 16 years, anyways, and it has more resonance. And in some ways, it's become a little more controversial. It seems to me on the left, on some ways. But we'll get there. Let's just start with people. The people know, and I should say, for people who can't see, N-O. You got the book right there. That should be on your bookshelf.
Should it?
Out. You know that, right? That's.
Yeah, I'm kind of a
Oh, that's good. Yeah, that's good. Maybe you need a bigger version of it, though. It gets, but all right. So the people know this.
I wrote this tiny little book here, Sam. Here it is. It's real small. You can read it so fast. It's
like
so
those little
small.
red books that the Black Panthers would sell in Berkeley.
Yeah. I remember those. They were very cheaply printed. Do you remember that? I think they were printed in China or something and brought over by the boatload.
They were. All right. Well, so the title is a play on a Carl Sandburg book, which was actually like a book length poem.
I've got it here.
Tell us about that. He's going to actually show us, folks.
He actually is. Yeah.
He's going to keep referencing. Yeah.
I do this. I'm constantly pulling books off the shelf to show. This is Zoom. It's like, welcome to my office, Sam.
There you go.
I've got all the books. They're all right here. Damn it.
All right. But why? So what?
Carl Sandburg. He, it's just one of the great all-time statements of faith in ordinary people. So it was published in 1936. The great, the decade of the common man. This was the period when America was more in love with democracy and average people than any other time in our history. And also, not coincidentally, it was a time of great success for the left, such as it is or was. I mean, I don't know what you say anymore, but
right.
The labor movement was growing by leaps and bounds. I think it tripled in size in the course of the decade. Franklin Roosevelt was in the White House. Social Security got done. All of these emergency measures to give people jobs during the Depression. He broke up the banks, regulated Wall Street. I mean, the stuff that they did then, it's heroic, and it's somewhat sad to me that it's slowly fading from memory. But it's what they did is just it puts modern day politics to shame. Anyhow,
in terms of its great period to do things, right? I mean,
get stuff done, but also their attitude towards ordinary people in this country. To bring it back to Carl Sandburg, it's a viewpoint that we have a lot of trouble understanding or replicating here in our own day. We're so, speaking we liberals, we're so suspicious of those, Trump voters out in the red states, that it's very hard for us to write something like that. The people, yes. And so when I say the people know, that's not my attitude. That's the attitude of the people I'm trying to describe, this long history of anti-populism in America.
So, all right. So let's go back and just talk a little bit about the history of populism. And I guess maybe institutionalized populism starts with you in Kansas and your home state. 1890s.
All of my writing starts in Kansas.
Yeah, of course.
Although I'm joining you now from suburban Washington, D.C., I was in Kansas until a few weeks ago. I was out there visiting my dad, who is 91 years old, but that's neither here nor there. Populism, the word, it's not. This is what I want to drive home to your viewers: is that it's not just a word that that comes down to us from the Latin or something, and we can just use it however we want. I mean, we can do whatever, it's language. You can do whatever you want. But the word was consciously invented in the year 1891 by a bunch of Kansas politicians riding on a train between Kansas City and Topeka. And they were trying to think up a name for supporters of this left-wing third-party movement that they had launched, and that had started off with a huge bang in the state of Kansas and also in a bunch of other states on the Great Plains. And the word was, of course, was populism. And that's what the party its formal name was the People's Party, but it came to be known as the Populist Party till by the end, people didn't even know that it had, another name. That's just what they called it, the populist. The word was an enormous success right from the very start. One of the, I have a lot of, as you no doubt have seen a lot of humorous illustrations in the book, but one of them that I didn't include is a newspaper in this tiny little town in Kansas. And this is a few days after the word was invented on this train ride. And this newspaper puts it in a huge headline, the word populist, exclamation point. Are you a populist? It says underneath, and it goes on and on about, and then it just reprints a whole lot of, People's Party, folderol, sort of the usual workerist stuff that they would always, but they knew that the word was a winner right from the start, that they had come up with something good.
And so what was the Populist Party, People's Party plank at that time? I mean, platform. I mean,
what were they about?
They were like an ascendant. They were like an ascendant third party. I mean, and they moved very quickly. I mean, I think in that election, or maybe it was in 1892, they won 4 states. I think it was.
Yeah, they won a bunch of states. They're the last third party to do that, and they also elected governors. We had more than one populist governor in Kansas. They had members of the House of Representatives. They had U.S. senators, mayors, et cetera, et cetera. And by the way, all over the country, it wasn't just on the Great Plains. They did not do very well in the Northeast, but they did very well out in the West. They had the mayor of San Francisco at one point was a populist, and the South was the place where it was most fiercely contested. They fought hard in the South, but they lost, which I assume we'll talk about it later on, with like dreadful ramifications that lasted for decades. But it was a left-wing party. Mainly it came out of, the idea was to bring together all the economic reform groups of the time, but the main group that was behind it was called the Farmers Alliance. It was like the Farmers Union that still exists today. It was an enormous, farmers were more than half the population at the time. It was an enormous group. It had millions and millions and millions of members. And they came together with labor unions. The Knights of Labor were part of this. A couple of others, the United Mine Workers were in it, that sort of thing, and set up this party. And the things that they believed in, they wanted federal farm programs. They wanted regulation of banks. They wanted the government to break up monopolies. They wanted the government to nationalize the railroads. They wanted to get us off the gold standard. This was very, very important to them. They were the currency was a huge issue in the 1890s in a way that it is not anymore. And then a bunch of other things that they didn't emphasize as much, but they wanted a whole bunch of political reforms, the secret ballot. They wanted votes for women, things like that right down the line. And so they were regarded for many decades. As you mentioned, their life came and went very quickly.
Yep.
In the space of about 6 or 7 years, they rose up and then disappeared. And after that, for historians in the early part of the 20th century, looked back at populism as a great moment. This was the predecessor of the New Deal. This is where so many of the big reform ideas got started. And then we can talk about what happened after that.
Yeah, I want to give me a sense, though. I'm also, and part of this is just sort of like my most recent fascination. Like, how did that develop? Sort of coming out of Reconstruction, you had the radical Republicans, which went really, in many respects, were there were some changes, like things like post office and public schools.
Yes,
but largely thwarted by Johnson. And then
you're talking about in the South here.
Yeah, well, I'm just talking broadly speaking in terms of Reconstruction. Like, where does this come from out of that? Is it what was the sort of preceding event? Because when we talk about, and we're going to get up to the New Deal, that newfound, I guess, love or embracing of people that you were talking about, which in many respects was also like, there was also a certain amount of fear involved in that too, because people had just taken a beating. Broadly speaking, the people had just taken a beating. Like, I wonder, what was happening in the 1880s or in the 1870s, coming out of the wake of the Civil War, that sort of put us in a position where this movement would catch fire so quickly.
Okay. Well, the main thing is that it was hard times for farmers, and they were it's like I said, it's more than half of the population of the country, and they are on their way down economically. Farm prices drop and drop and drop every year, and there these stories. So the Farmers Alliance, like I said, had been going for some time before they went into politics. And the idea of the Farmers Alliance was that if farmers got together, and remember, these are the people at the very bottom of the social hierarchy of this country, the lowest rank of mankind, and dirt farmers, family farmers, and in a lot of places they're tenant farmers, especially in the South. So sharecroppers. And these are, the Farmers Alliance said, we're going to get together, we're going to learn about why our situation is so bad, and then we're going to take collective action. And they did the education part of that pretty well. They blanketed the country with pamphlets. By the way, and when you research this in the state archives and stuff, you read their pamphlets. They produced these in enormous numbers. Pamphlets explaining to farmers why their situation was so bad. And a lot of it had to do with currency deflation.
Right.
Because the gold standard, the problem with a gold standard when you have like a situation like the 1880s and 1890s is there's not a lot of gold in the world, and there's not a lot of gold in the United States, and the amount of gold doesn't increase a lot every year. But at the same time, the economy was growing enormously. I mean, this is the great period of American capitalism, and the population is growing because of immigration, and the currency is not. And so what this makes for is deflation. So if you're someone who borrows money, this is particularly devastating because you borrow money, you have to pay it back a couple of years later, and it's worth a lot more. It has gone up in value. And so this was really, really bad for debtors. And farmers are a debtor class.
I want to make sure people understand this dynamic because you have an increase in demand, right? Because there's more people, and there's more economic activity.
Right. But the currency does not. Right.
And they can't print more money.
Right. Because it's on the gold
tied
standard.
to gold.
Right.
And so money becomes more expensive in some way. It's harder
right. So
to get
when you measure it against your crops or something like that. So measure it against, say, wheat. So when you borrow the money, it's worth 5 bushels of wheat. When you have to pay it back, it's worth 10.
Right.
Okay. So this is a recipe for disaster for farmers and for a lot of other groups as well.
Right. It's exactly why, and
why we eventually did get off the gold. We don't have the gold standard anymore.
Right. And that's why we can, and that's a separate sort of modern monetary.
Yeah. But the populists were way ahead of the rest of us on that particular question. But what's funny is they were just slammed for it at the time. They were regarded as cranks, as anti-intellectuals, because every economist in the world believed in the gold standard. And here's these people out on the Great Plains saying, the gold standard is a bad thing. And it's like blasphemy, to say something like that. And as we'll get into this in a minute, but
and that's motivated reasoning too, because if I'm a banker and
the gold standard rocks. Right. If you're a banker or a lender or, whatever, you have a lot of money, that money, it's becoming more valuable every year.
That's right. Yes. And so I lend you $10 today. And like you say, that $10 can buy me a bushel of wheat. But when you pay it back to me, I can buy 10 bushels of wheat with it, or whatever,
right.
the dynamic.
Exactly.
Okay.
So bankers and basically the Eastern establishment in general, not to mention the rest of the world, the British Empire ran on the gold standard. This was accepted all over the world. And here's these cranks out in farm country saying no. And you can imagine what the reaction was. Anyhow, so that's the background. The Farmers Alliance tried to find a solution for the problem that was not political. For various reasons, they didn't want to go into politics. You can guess why. People in the South were Democrats. People in the North were Republicans. They didn't all share political views. So they said, we'll try to solve our problems they built a cooperative. They were really into farm co-ops. I don't know if you're from farm country, you know what this is. They were really into that. Well, that didn't work. And so after trying all of these different methods, they said, look, the only way we can save our livelihoods is by going into politics. And this mass movement, millions and millions of people went into politics in the year 1890, and with a huge bang in the state of Kansas, they won the state legislature in a very short amount of time, beat the local Republican Party. Kansas was a one-party state then, as it still is today. And the populists very briefly threw these guys out. And and then it took off from there, and it was growing by leaps and bounds. Oh, you wanted to know about Reconstruction and about the South. And so the South, obviously a rural economy, a lot of farmers, almost everyone was a farmer in the South. And populism was obviously very attractive there. And they did a really interesting thing in the South. So the Populist Party had a black contingent. Historians call them the Black Populists. And up until then in the South, this is 20 years after Reconstruction. Reconstruction is over, but in a lot of places, blacks could still vote in the South at the time. And the South was dominated by the Democratic Party, what they used to call the Bourbon Democrats, very conservative Democrats who were also the local ruling elite, the bankers, the railroad owners, etc. And the way they solidified their hold on the South, the way they kept in power was through a doctrine they called white solidarity, which is that the idea that white people have, that their interests as whites is more important than their interests as, say, workers or farmers or whatever, that they have to stick together, and vote for whoever the white leadership says is the candidate. And hence, so that way, in that way, the Democratic Party retained its control of the South. The populists came along and said, well, we have a different proposal to make, which is we think that the white farmers' interests are, the farmer's, his interest as a farmer is more important than his interest as a white person. And as a matter of fact, his interests as a farmer are really similar to the interests of black farmers. And therefore, we're going to reach out to black voters and say, let's build a coalition based on class interest rather than on racial interest. And this was, now I'm not saying here that they were like racially enlightened or anti-racist in a modern day sense. They weren't. They were not like us today, but they were able to understand this. This was real simple, right. It's like, no matter what you think about black people, they're in the same boat as you economically. And if you get together with them politically, you can change things. And this caught on. Now, you can imagine the controversy. This was extremely controversial, and it was so upsetting to the Bourbon Democrats of the South that they used every tool at their disposal to ensure that populism didn't win across the South. And they shot people. They both sides fought with each other. But the Bourbon Democrats kept winning. There's only one Southern state where the populists came out on top, and that was North Carolina. And it's a long story, but it ended in an absolute stunning disaster. Do you want to hear the story?
Yes.
So in North Carolina, they got together with the local Republican Party. The South was a one-party region, Democratic, but the Republicans still existed in a few places. And in North Carolina, they were still around. And most black voters in North Carolina were loyal to the Republican Party. And so the populists made a deal with the Republicans and said, let's get together and we'll beat the Democrats. And they did it. And they actually won. And they took over the state legislature. They elected the governor. They elected a U.S. senator, et cetera. And they put various measures in place that allowed local control, which meant that in places where blacks were in the majority, they could elect, aldermen and stuff like this. And the white Democrats went absolutely berserk. And you see this, by the way, this is always the story of populism in those days, that the elites, whoever they are, just go nuts. Hysteria ensues. And in 1898, they decided to beat populism down using the only real weapon they had at their disposal, which is white supremacy. And they actually called it the White Supremacy Campaign, and ran on this hysterical campaign of racist hatred and fear, and in this way succeeded in beating populism in North Carolina and beating the Republicans. And the first thing the new white supremacy legislature did once they had beaten these guys was disenfranchise blacks and poor whites. And they did this actually all across the South. All the southern states at this time disenfranchised blacks and a lot of poor whites. And the reason in every state was always the same was either to keep populism from ever happening again, or to keep something like populism. In some states, it was delayed by 5 or 6 years, so populism was already gone. But they always disenfranchised blacks and poor whites with the same idea that you've got to make sure that something like this never happens again.
So, there was also, and just like to talk about the success of that time, they had the populists made a basically a similar alliance with the Jennings, right?
With the National Democrats,
and my understanding is that Tom Watson, who you write about, was almost going to be the VP.
Well, that was the idea. He's a very interesting guy because he kind of went nuts later on after his life really went bad, and he famously went a little crazy. But we'll talk about him in a minute. So the way the story of populism climaxed and then collapsed is that here's this party that is growing and growing, and there's a terrible depression in the 1890s. And there's enormous strikes. The Pullman strike happens. The Homestead strike happens. There's a protest march on Washington, the first one ever. Populists organize it. It was called Coxey's Army. These unemployed people went to Washington and protested, and it looks like populism is the coming force in American politics. Its numbers are growing. They're electing people from more states. They're reaching out into the big cities. They run, a very formidable slate in Chicago. They're trying their best in Ohio, things like this. And 1896 comes along, presidential election year. There's a Democrat president in the White House. It's Grover Cleveland, but he is essentially no different than the Republicans, except for on some very moderate issues. But he believes in the gold standard. He's very conservative. He's the one that sent federal troops into Chicago to put down the Pullman strike. He's a very conservative Democrat, essentially no different from the Republicans. And the Democrats meet in their convention in Chicago and basically throw Cleveland and the gold standard and all the rest of it, just throw them to the winds and nominate this guy, William Jennings Bryan, 36 years old, a one-term congressman from Nebraska. And they nominate this guy for president on the strength of a speech that he has given denouncing the gold standard, attacking the gold standard. And, this is the famous Cross of Gold speech. Yep. He says, "You will not press down upon the brow of labor this crown of thorns," comparing them to the crucifixion of Jesus. "You will not crucify mankind upon this cross of gold," meaning the gold standard. And the convention erupts that he's the most amazing thing they've ever seen. And they nominate him for president. And the populists, about a month later, actually just a few weeks later, they say, well, Bryan, he talks like us. A lot of them know him because he's from Nebraska. They say, he's a good guy. He's not with us on all our other issues. And in fact, the Democrats have given us no end of hell in the South, but he's with us on this one big issue. So they decide to cross-endorse him. The populists are going to throw in their lot with the Democratic Party at the national level. And if he wins, they figure they'll be able to name some members of the cabinet or something like that. And they will be, they will have achieved success in a very short amount of time. So it's alluring, and they sign up, they get on board. And instead of winning, everybody thinks at first Bryan is this man of destiny with this amazing oratorical power, et cetera. And he goes on the whistle stop tour. I think it's the first one ever. He just goes around the country giving speeches. And the Republicans just unleash against him the most incredible campaign of villainy and infamy, that this country has ever seen. They outraise and outspend him something like 20 or 30 to 1. We don't really know because they didn't report, they kept the records, but we don't know what they were. And they crushed him in this amazing campaign of 1896, a sort of proto Karl Rove, a guy called Mark Hanna, who managed William McKinley's campaign.
Right.
And we'll talk about that in a minute, because the details of it, I spend a lot of time on the details of it because they're quite amusing, and they're also very telling for the present day. But when Bryan goes down, populism goes down with him. And the People's Party, they set to argue, they start arguing with each other, they break into factions, and before the 1897 is over, they basically don't exist anymore. They're through as a national party. Now, you asked about Tom Watson.
Yeah, I mean, that guy, I mean, that is because, we'll get to this later, but, Watson's trajectory is, he went from someone who was, it seems to me, very explicit, like black farmer, white farmer, you guys,
let's get together, we can win. Yeah, that's what he said.
Farmer is the operative term there. Yeah. And then within, and at one point he was going to be, they were hoping to get him to be Jennings, Bryan's running
VP.
mate.
Yep.
And
and he's a classic example of, he was also very young and weirdly talented. Historians, by the way, just so you know, are fascinated by Watson because he's the classic example of a reformer going wrong. Although there's many other examples, right, of course, but he what happened is, he was in some ways the populists' most fiery leader. He's the one that wrote a famous article about the race question and how what was called the race question at the time, how the Populist Party would settle it. And the way they'd settle it is exactly what you just said. They would reach out to black farmers and win their votes. And that was, and then he ran for Congress in Georgia. He almost certainly won, but the local Democrats cheated him, as they always did back then. And so he never got to take office. He had been in Congress as a Democrat before all this began. But he saw his career just be completely destroyed by the Southern Democrats. And after the campaign is over in 1896, and he's just humiliated nationally. I mean, Bryan won't even meet with him. The populists say to William Jennings Bryan, okay, the price of us endorsing you is you have to accept our guy for VP. And Bryan just ignores them. So he's just humiliated in all these different ways. And he sort of goes silent for a while. And he emerges from this silence a couple of years later as the country's foremost racist. And he becomes this incredibly ferocious hater of blacks. And, the very people that he had been trying to reach out to a few years previously. And like I say, historians are fascinated by this, about, what goes wrong with this guy's personality and how does this happen? What does this tell you about him? What does this tell you about the movement? And ultimately what you conclude is it doesn't say a whole lot about the movement, because this is one guy, right, who is doing this stuff. And by the time he claims the name populist, by the way, and clings to this, up into like 1904. But by that time, he's the only one left. There's nobody, all the other, like the populists from Kansas have all gone back to the Republicans, or they've gone back to the Socialist Party. This is Eugene Debs, who's another populist leader, becomes a socialist leader, et cetera, et cetera. But here's Watson still going. And, he has no followers to speak of, and he becomes the nation's leading racist. And then at some point, and he goes from bad to worse. He starts running this newspaper, and anyhow, he encourages lynch mobs. There's these terrible incidents, and they finally, he makes his peace with the Democratic Party. They run him for the U.S. Senate, and he wins, and he ends his life as a U.S. senator from Georgia as a Democrat. This viciously racist, anti-Semitic Democrat.
And was that? I mean, because what it raises to me, I mean, there's a couple of things about Watson that I find sort of fascinating, and it had come across him over the years because he's had this dramatic, like, my question is populism, and this, I'm getting ahead of myself, but a little bit, but we can have this conversation here on some level too, is populism a tactic, or is it an ideology or is it a disposition? I mean, that is like, because I think Watson ends up being sort of some of the basis for smearing populism.
Oh yeah,
yes.
No, that's exactly right. And so later on in the 1950s, when historians turn against populism, that Watson is always their example of, look, this movement, one of its leaders became this awful person. But just so you know, his biographer was a guy called C. Van Woodward, and Woodward never thought that, wrote the classic biography of Tom Watson. Woodward never thought that because Watson, degenerated into this racist, he didn't think that reflected poorly on the populist movement. He thought that this was that the populist movement in the early 1890s, when it was growing and making its outreach and stuff, that this was a very hopeful moment. This was,
right.
This is a great moment. But there's this larger question, and I don't want to brush it off, about what happens when progressives lose and they get frustrated and they turn bitter. And you and I have been around long enough. I know people like this.
Me too. Me too.
I know people who are Trump supporters now, who have turned people that used to be on the left with me in the 90s and have grown so bitter by their frustration at the hands of however you want to put it, the Democratic Party, the politically correct, that they have gone in a terrible, terrible, terrible direction.
Well, that is what interests me about this, like with and I think my thinking has evolved a little bit in this respect, is that that's what brings me to this question about populism. Is it a tactic? Is it a disposition? Is it an ideology? Because if it's a tactic, it can be adorned by,
it can be swiped by Trump.
Trump.
I get it. Yeah,
by Watson.
So I would say no, that it's. I don't know what you mean by ideology, but what my meaning of it would be, this is the American version of the Labour Party in England or the Labour Party in Australia. The Labour Party in Australia, actually, at one point, they all started at the same time. The Labour Party in Australia considered calling itself the People's Party, just out of homage to what then looked like a promising movement in the United States. And all the social democratic parties in Europe are starting up at the same time. Populism is part of that. And I take my definition, and by the way, my definition is strictly an American one, but my definition of lowercase p populism is a transracial movement of working class people for social democracy. And in American history, it flowers in the 1930s. This is really the great period for it. And we started off talking about Carl Sandburg, which is a kind of cultural populism. And there's many other examples of that. The movies of Frank Capra, almost any World War II movie, and at the same time, the labor movement, and at the same time, Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal is happening. And that's, for me, that is the great populist period of American life.
But that is not transracial per se. I mean, is it? Well,
the CIO certainly. The CIO, which is the main labor organizing sort of umbrella group at the time, was militantly transracial, militantly anti-racist by the standards of the 1930s. Probably the most anti-racist white group, anyway, that there was in America. Without a doubt. And you think of people like Paul Robeson, who sang this incredible song "Ballad for Americans," which is in some ways this great musical version of American populism, which is explicitly anti-racist. So yeah, that was, again, they weren't anti-racist by our modern day standards. They weren't as enlightened as we are today, but by the standards of the time, yeah, they were very much so.
So what, I guess, and we'll bump up to,
and you got to also remember the anti-populists, the other part of the story. The anti-populists of the 30s and of the 1890s were incredibly racist, just like off the scale racist. Right. Like when they would attack Roosevelt, I did not realize this. I never read this anywhere, Sam, until I did the research for this book, how racist the anti-Roosevelt movement was. It wasn't just, they were into eugenics. I mean, they were fascist. And this is big business in America. These are important corporation lawyers in America, economists in America. They were part of this sort of fascist current coming out of Europe, But thank God for, in this country at least, we were on the right side of all those questions. While we were celebrating the common man in this country, and our people were writing books like The People, Yes. While the Europeans were writing, Revolt of the Masses, right. And Oswald Spengler, this kind of thing.
I want to ask you about that era too, because one thing that I found really interesting was the, I don't know if you would call it patriotism or like the Americanism that was embraced by the populace at that time. And I wonder if what happened to that, because on some level it feels like the American imperialism,
claiming the symbols,
American imperialism sort of start to undercut that, and the notion of internationalism on the left undercut that sort of like, I don't know what you would call it, patriotism.
No, they people do call it. They call it Americanism. This phenomenon in the 30s when you have labor unions, immigrant groups and stuff like that claiming the symbols of America, the flag, the labor movement and the flag, and claiming the founding fathers and identifying themselves with American democracy. And often, let's admit it, in a way that to the modern ear sounds pretty schmaltzy. you know?
I think that type of jingoism,
well, it wasn't jingoism at the time, but it can blend into that.
Jingoism,
yeah. So right? Like Michael Kazin has written about this, that this 30s sensibility, which you see, these beautiful like WPA murals celebrating the American people, that does blend into Cold War, into the sort of really unfortunate jingoism of the Cold War and also of our own time. And that is really unfortunate, but that's also because, look, the good guys have been beaten. It's a complicated story, but these symbols, I would say, are always contested. And just because, assholes have them at the moment doesn't mean that we can't take them back.
Do you think we should? I think that is like,
hell yes.
Well, I'll say this because we drive around, and I drive around with my daughter. She's 15. She is, I don't know where she got it, but she is vehemently anti-Trump, and she is.
Well, why not? Where did she get that? Come on.
Of course. I'm being facetious, but I'm struck by if she sees somebody flying an American flag, her first reaction is like, "Ooh," and I'm like, "What's?" I don't chide her. I interrogate her a little bit about it, but it occurs to me that maybe it was during Vietnam, but that notion of populism, because I don't think you can have a populist movement without some embracing of at least the ambitions of America. And I think there's many on the left who, and I'm talking maybe from a tactical standpoint, right? I'm also pretty jaded, but I'm trying not to be at times, but I'm talking just from purely a tactical standpoint. You need to embrace some of that Americana. You cannot react like my 15-year-old daughter does. We're driving by. She's like, "Ooh,
Sam." And I, of course, you and I are on exactly the same page. I fly the American flag. I'm extremely patriotic.
But you have to balance it.
Of course. Well, think about. Look, one of Thomas Jefferson, for God's sakes. I went to the University of Virginia, and he's the only one of the founding fathers that even remotely believed in democracy. This is the man that wrote the Declaration of Independence. I learned when I was down there, I did a tour of Monticello a few years ago. He wrote the Declaration of Independence on a desk carved for him by a slave. It's incredibly difficult and problematic to pick your way through it.
Right.
That a man could be both great and awful at the same time. And that is troubling. And I guess it's easy to just wash your hands of the whole thing and say, well, to hell with that. I don't even want to think about it. And maybe we need to choose different heroes from our past. I'm fine with that too.
Thomas Paine's up
Yeah,
there.
Paine's a great one. Franklin Roosevelt, come on. Carl Sandburg, why not?
Right.
You know, and you know, many others. Paul Robeson, we mentioned him. Great man. And maybe we need to do that, but we've still got to have continuity with the past, and we've got to have connections with the American people. What I know will not work is a liberalism that is just about expertise and white collar meritocracy, you know, and being at the top of the hierarchy and ordering everybody else to do as we say. And I know that won't work. By the way, we were talking earlier, we started the show talking about what I've been saying for 20 years. You know, I was a great believer in Obama when he got elected. I think you were as well. I was very enthusiastic about it.
I had my hopes up when the Reverend Wright tape came out. I started getting a little more hopeful, frankly. But I'm quite convinced he was. And I now believe that he was never sitting in those pews, and that he did not hear that.
Well, but I think about it all the time, because for me, it was a real turning point, because George Bush was very similar to Trump in a lot of ways, like appointed these incompetents to run everything in Washington, you know, these fools. And here comes Obama. I had met Obama. He was a professor at the University of Chicago, where I went to graduate school, very intelligent. And he brought in a cabinet of people much like him, very intelligent people. Hell, the president of Harvard, Larry Summers,
right,
and these very, very intelligent people proceeded to continue the the bailout policies of the Bush administration, and to do all the other, all the sort of half measures that he did, to deliver this version of universal health care that's really no universal health care at all,
right?
And not do anything about Wall Street. Inequality continues. Everything continues. Deindustrialization. He doesn't, the trade agreements. He doesn't do anything. And for me, that is a huge point, an inflection point where you have to ask yourself as a liberal, what is this? Why do these? And I think I finally brought it to an answer with this new book, that this form of liberalism is about elites making decisions for us. It is about, the highly educated, coming together in a cabinet like Obama and sitting around a table and agreeing with one another and coming to consensus decisions with one another. And it doesn't work. And what does work, and here I'm completely flipping the 1950s script, what does work is populism. What works is mass movements of working class people in the street. What works is things like the Farmers Alliance, the Populist Party, the CIO in the 1930s, the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s. Enormous protest movements of working class people organized explicitly around issues of concern to working class people. That works. That gets results.
Well, I mean, it's but short-lived in some way, right?
The labor movement still exists, Sam. These guys it's still out there. It just is. It has no energy. It has no vital spark anymore. But we all know why it's there and what its role should be, and that it should be growing by leaps and bounds. These things are all out there simmering under the surface. You saw Black Lives Matter, 100,000 people in the streets. This is extraordinary. Now, it's not a populist movement per se yet, because it's not about the economic issues. Populism is focused, zoomed in on the economic issues, but Black Lives Matter could become that. It could happen very quickly, and if it did, it would be unstoppable.
I mean, I think we end up on the same place, and there was one point, I guess I don't think I've ever named who said this to me, but I might as well just say it now. He's so out of politics now. But at one point I got invited to Elliot Spitzer's, one of his Christmas parties. I have a feeling they had multiple ones. when I was going to be a regular on his CNN show before that fell.
I was on his show a lot. By the way, he was one of the very few that was interested in what I was saying.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is that I think, it's unfortunate because he very much, I think, was, I suspect FDR was very much a model that he was following. I mean, FDR was, he wasn't the technocrat necessarily that Obama was, but, and I remember distinctly asking him, and this must have been about 2010. We were at this Christmas party, and so he was a little bit drunk, and I think he was a little bit looser than he would have been. I certainly was.
Watch out, Mr. Sater.
And he said, I said, why is he pivoting to austerity? And
meaning Obama.
Obama. And because that was really
that was the moment. Yeah. Yeah.
Well,
he embraced, what was it called? The grand bargain. Oh my God.
Right. I mean,
did that make me mad? Oh.
He had shown himself a little bit when he wouldn't do the cram down in 2009. But
the stimulus package was way too small. Do you remember that?
Way too small. Yes, it was.
And he had opportunity in his hands.
Yes.
And
there was a huge wasted opportunity.
Yeah.
And I asked him, and Spitzer shared this same frustration. I mean, he would have, and he said he has surrounded himself with people and he thinks they know what they're talking about. And he said, and Spitzer said this to me, I'll never forget. He goes, I know these people. I went to Princeton with them and they were all C students and they cheated at tennis. And I just thought, like, this is a class traitor.
Yeah.
That I'm here with.
Yeah.
I mean, he still has the accoutrements.
Awesome.
And but this is a guy who, because he grew up with these people, realizes that they are full of shit. Excuse me. And
are you allowed to say that on the TV?
I am. Yeah. You're not. No, of course. Yeah, you can't. But that he is full. That they are full of shit. In that Obama, he said, I think something to the effect of, like, because he grew up, sort of fighting to get into that class, did not realize, he thought that they deserved to be there.
Yeah, it's a very typical attitude of someone who has succeeded by dint of educational. Obama's real smart, did well on his tests, went to Columbia, went to Harvard Law. Like Clinton before him had, been trained to think of the meritocracy as legitimate.
Yes.
This is the great fallacy of our era.
Because it worked for him.
Yeah.
I mean, like, let a couple of people up and they
But that's one of the great things about Roosevelt. I mean, you brought up Franklin Roosevelt, and one of the lessons that I take from the 30s that I always repeat to people, because nobody is aware of this, they look back at Roosevelt as the beginning of government by expert, but it wasn't really. Had he really appointed the Larry Summerses of his day, the leading authorities on economics, his administration would have been the Hoover administration. It would have the same crap. The economists of his day signed these joint letters. You know how they love to do this, like 230 economists demand. They did this denouncing Roosevelt and denouncing the New Deal. The orthodox economics of the 1930s absolutely despised Franklin Roosevelt, as did the orthodox lawyers of the time. This is the anti-populist hysteria of the 1930s that I write about in the book. This, by the way, this hysteria, we didn't get to talk about this, but this hysteria recurs throughout American history. You have episodes of hysteria. And the one in the 1930s is particularly fascinating. All these corporation attorneys, and they have you see the rise of the first great right-wing front group. It was called the American Liberty League, funded by the DuPont family and a couple other very, very wealthy families. And they had more money than the Republican Party in 1936. And they would put on the speakers on national radio hookups, editorials in the newspapers, et cetera, often denouncing the New Deal constantly, but often on really racist grounds, because it was allowing people to succeed who did not deserve to succeed. Why did they not deserve to succeed? Because they were from poor stock. They were at the bottom because they were supposed to be at the bottom, in this sort of social Darwinist view of the world. Really extraordinary stuff. And what's funny is that anybody, like the DuPont family, these are intelligent people, that anybody thought this is how you win an election in America. They went down to this crushing defeat. outspending Roosevelt by an enormous margin. All the newspapers in America are on the side of the Republican candidate, Alf Landon, and he loses. He only won 2 states in 1936.
But in some ways, they've won now, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
they've learned. So the right wingers learned, the sort of descendants of the DuPont of that effort, the Koch brothers and stuff like that, have learned you don't attack people by saying, get back in your place. That's not how you respond. You respond by saying, the way Reagan did, the way Trump did, I am your friend. I am, a man of the people. I have this folksy attitude, look at my unvarnished way of speaking, and then you pass the Paul Ryan tax cuts, or in Reagan's case,
exactly.
the 81 tax cut. And meanwhile, the Democrats have, in their folly, in their incredible ongoing 30 years in running folly, have decided that the way to fight back is to really double down on identifying themselves with the white collar educated elite in the wealthy suburbs and this kind of thing. Oh my God. I think they're going to win this fall, by the way. I think Biden deserves to win and will win. I mean, because this man, his screw ups are just unimaginable at this point. By the way, I never asked you, how are you doing in this, our COVID?
Well, wait, I'm okay. But I agree with you that I think Biden's going to win because people are upset.
He doesn't deserve to, but he's going to. Trump
hasn't delivered. He hasn't delivered. And I want to remind everybody, Trump won with less votes than Romney lost with. Hillary Clinton was a bad candidate.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not, I don't want to litigate whether she's a good person or would have been a good president or any of that. She was a bad, deeply flawed candidate for a myriad of reasons, some which were external to her, some which were internal, but that is the reality. I still contend that Martin O'Malley would have won. However,
that's actually probably true. Yeah.
However, the problem is with Biden is that 2022 looks very problematic. 2024 looks very problematic unless there is some addressing of the needs of the American public. And this
populism, there is genuine populism. And the thing is, I don't know if it can be delivered from on high.
This is what is slippery to me. Is populism a set of policies? Because what do you call Donald Trump getting up there and being folksy? I mean, is it folksy?
I call it a sort of fake populism. I've been writing about this since What's the Matter with Kansas. Right. And that's what I think it is. That's what I call it. It's not populism because there's no content to it. And he said the right thing on several issues. I didn't vote for him and I can't stand him, but he did talk about the endless wars. I'm glad somebody talked about that.
Oh, no, totally. I agree with that.
And he did talk about what the damage done by the bad trade agreements. I'm glad he did that. But, anybody could tell the guy's a liar.
Those are marginal. I mean, like I mentioned this yesterday. There's a piece, I have it somewhere around here, from, I think it was, I don't know, maybe it was Forbes or something. Somebody went and talked to some construction workers in Ohio. Yeah. And they got a quote, and it's one quote. You can find a quote from anybody, but the construction worker says, I'm voting for Trump again because he fixed healthcare. He solved the trade deficit. He cut the, we don't owe China as much money anymore. He balanced the budget.
Look, there's always misinformed voters out there.
Yes, but that's like, when we go back on this history of the white supremacy campaign, in North Carolina, like you talk about, with Jennings being crushed because of that Republican money. Like my point is that, like, to build a lasting victory, like, what is that a sustaining victory? It seems to me that you get into office by hook or crook. It's, Sanders could have won this year.
Okay. So I want to point out to you, Sam, that I'm 55 years old. I thought the world that I was born into, the New Deal world with America as a middle-class society, America was for white people in the North anyway, was a social democracy in 1965. In effect, people had health insurance. You would get paid well, et cetera. We didn't have a formal social democracy like they have in Europe, but we basically had that. And that's gone now. But when I was coming up in the 70s, I thought that was permanent. I thought that the middle-class society was here to stay, and all that it required is that we would bring everybody in. Everybody would, we would grow the middle class, and and that would be it. And instead, we did the opposite, and we smashed it for everyone, and made a handful of billionaires really, 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 really rich. And that's what we've done. But that sort of legacy of the New Deal, that's survived for 40 years. Or 50 years, depending on how you look at it. That's impressive. It can be done. I just, winning little victories by hook or by crook, that's one thing. But building a mass, look, for the right, that's been enough. Reagan beat Carter pretty soundly. But since then, they haven't won any great victories. George W. Bush did not beat Al Gore. He won his second time around, but just barely. His dad, okay, so they won some victories, but they, regardless of whether they win or lose, or win massively or win slightly, they rule like they have an incredible mandate. Just look at the stuff Trump has done. I want to remind you of one more thing before we run out of time. The last 2 years of Obama's presidency, I used to write these articles saying, remember, he didn't do anything the last 2 years. He did nothing. He just gave speeches. Yep. And I came up with a whole list of things because he didn't have Congress, right? I came up with a whole list of things that the president could do without Congress. For example, enforce antitrust. The laws are already on the books. Just call in your attorney general and say, let's go get them. For example, go after universities for the tuition, spiral, or there's any number of things he could have done. There was an escape hatch on NAFTA. He could have renegotiated that unilaterally. All sorts of things that Obama could have done without Congress. But I remember at the time, there was this whole cheering section or choir, whatever you want to call it, among the pundit class. I call them the pundit bureau because they do everything together. And where ideas like mine were dismissed as magical thinking. Like we thought that Obama was some kind
Green
of
Lanternism.
Yes, that's one
what
way.
It was.
Yeah,
it was
yeah.
Green
And then
Lanternism.
Yeah,
is what they would say. You think he has magical powers.
Yeah,
but in fact,
it's like no, the antitrust laws are actually on the books. Trust me on this. Another one, laws against fraud. He could have prosecuted the Wall Street guys who were responsible for the crisis. He would have been a hero if he had done that. It doesn't take Congress to do that. It just takes some backbone.
Well, it was only until Donald Trump came in.
But wait a minute. The worst case is this. It was a columnist for the New York Times. I can't remember which one. Actually wrote an article saying, all this is wrong because the presidency is actually, it doesn't have a lot of power. It's not a very powerful office. I think about that all the time. Every time Donald Trump does some incredible thing unilaterally, he suspended the payroll tax, for God's sakes, without Congress. And every time he does this, every time he deregulates something, every time he rolls something back or finds some clever way to force a foreign country into doing his bidding, I think about that article. The presidency isn't really a very powerful office. To get Obama off the hook. What the hell is wrong with the liberals? What the hell is wrong with us?
Well, I think there is a subset. I've just talked about Nancy Pelosi, and you can assess what she's doing either as just sheer incompetence, or it's not sheer incompetence. It's incompetence brought about by having an agenda that diverges from a lot of the people she purports to represent. And so it looks like incompetence. But when you put in your messaging bill that we're going to subsidize Cobra instead of like anything else for health insurance, that's not incompetence. That is having a divergent agenda and trying to sort of like thread
so
the
Sam,
needle.
that was the great line in Listen Liberal. It's like ultimately the reason Obama did what he did is because that's what he wanted to do.
Yep.
And you got to face it. I regarded this man as a hero. I really admired him. I still admire him in a lot of ways, but he didn't want to do those things, you know? So, he could have enforced antitrust. He could have gone after Google. It doesn't matter anymore. But look, the thing is that the expiration date is coming for this kind of liberalism. Biden might squeak by. I think he probably will this fall. I think Biden will be president. God damn it. They have got to rethink the entire direction of the party, because Trumpism is not stopping.
Right.
Even if you defeat Trump, you're going to have another one. And the next one is not going to be quite as stupid.
I totally agree.
And look, or Ted Cruz.
Right.
And as I have been saying, look, I've been saying this since What's the Matter with Kansas, and I'm sick of saying it. And in fact, I'm not saying it anymore. I am withdrawing from the political conversation after this year. I mean, I have other things to do, other projects to work on. And frankly, just between you and me, I can't wait to get back to work on them. I'm so sick of this crap.
I know it.
But I'm done telling them. It's like, you tell them and they know what I say, and I've been saying the same thing all these years. If they don't rediscover their origins as a populist party, as a party that, the legacy of populism.
Who's the they, though? Are we just
the Democrats? But you're exactly right to say that, because of course you can't expect these changes to come from on high. You can't. You and I both know they have to come from the bottom up. And I don't know how you do that.
Well, that's the $64,000 question, right? I mean, or $64 or whatever it is. Under
the gold standard,
I don't like
$64.
I don't know if I mean it. To me, it's like, I look towards, like the Squad and the new members of Congress, and that is a nascent thing. And frankly, you and I are in the same generation, and I think people who are 20 years our junior have a very different. I mean, oddly enough, they have no connection whatsoever to the New Deal. Like, when you mentioned 65 I was born in 66. They have no connection to these things, but they have demands, and on some level, it's like, books that you have written provide them the sort of like, the ability to not have the limited imagination that many of us who grew up in the Reagan era, I think, sort of had on some level, and I think that's important. And that's where I was trying to get you with the green shoots.
The green shoots. Oh, okay. You wanted me to say something optimistic?
Yes, please.
All right. See you later, Sam.
I feel like that's the way we ended our last interview too.
I don't know. I'll say one thing that's optimistic. So when Bernie Sanders first ran for president, I interviewed him in 2015 or 14. And I thought at the time, I really liked this guy. He basically, he had read my books and basically recited chunks of them back to me. And I was very flattered by that. He didn't say that openly. He's not like, I'm going to quote from your book, but he would say stuff that was clearly very similar to what I was thinking. And I was flattered by that and impressed by that. But I also said at the time, but everybody in DC thinks this guy is a crank. Therefore, he's going to go nowhere. My astonishment and surprise in 2016 at how well he did, and then again in 2020 with everybody mimicking him this time around.
Yep.
That is beyond my wildest dreams of success. What he did. Now I know he's not the nominee, but damn, he came close. And yeah, the centrists outplayed him again, and succeeded in beating him, but there'll be another Sanders. That's not going to end. And let's hope for better luck next time around. I mean, it's got to happen. It's simply got to happen. Or maybe Joe Biden will. Here's another one. Maybe Joe Biden will turn out to be a great guy.
Come on, man. All right. Well, Thomas Frank.
He actually might. You don't know. I mean, lots of people, like everybody here in DC loves this guy.
I've been saying that there's two types of politicians I like. One's like AOC and Bernie Sanders with their politics. And then ciphers are my second favorite type of politician. And because there's at least an opportunity. Yeah. And I think Joe Biden is a cipher in many respects. And so there is an opportunity, but that is incumbent upon all of us to pick up the mantle. Thomas Frank, the book is The People Know, A Brief History of Populism. We'll put a link to it at majority.fm. Thanks so much. It's always a pleasure talking.
Sam, the pleasure is all mine, believe me.
All right, Thomas. We'll talk to you later. Bye.
See ya.
All right, folks. We went super long. Oh, geez.
Yeah.
Sorry about that. I've been interviewing him for so many years now that it's
casual.
Catch up. It's casual. It was a fun conversation. Fascinating stuff. And I think it's really important for people to read this stuff and, expand your imagination and understanding of where this country has been at different points and where it could go. That's very, very important. Going to take a quick break, go into the fun half of the program. Want to remind you, I'm very excited to introduce you to one of the coolest sponsors that we've had, Hunt a Killer. It's a murder mystery subscription box, and it's one of the most unique games out there. It brings the fun of an escape room to your home. Go to huntakiller.com/majority. Use the promo code majority at checkout for 20% off your first box. That's huntakiller.com/majority. Promo code majority. Don't forget, it's your support that makes this show possible. You can become a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. Your membership helps us, strive for upgraded cameras and microphones and whatever it is, and expand. We've got the AM Quickie right now. Going to try and monetize that soon. We've been doing it almost for a year, and the COVID threw us off a little bit, but tons of folks are starting to listen to it now. amquickie.com, or you can just find it on any of your podcast subscriptions. It is completely free. You can listen to it, or you can watch it on YouTube at Majority Report Live, youtube.com, Majority Report Live. That's our backup channel, and you can check that out. Reminder, Me Keys show happens right after this one at 3 p.m., youtube.com/the No Me Key Show. No Me Key Show. No Me Key Show. No Me Key Show. God, MIKI. So check that out every day.
It's not really the pronunciation you have wrong. It's more the rhythm.
It is. I know exactly what it is. It's because I'm from Massachusetts. I put the emphasis on the wrong vowel for just about every word that I speak. And I cannot, and I have some type of mental, it's not a mental block about her name in particular, because I have this, I still, for the life of me, I can't write a word with I and E. Like I know the I before E except after C. And even that, I still can't, I always switch the E and the I.
Yeah.
It's very strange. But so that's my mental problem, and I don't think it's going to get corrected, folks. I'm sorry. I mean, that ship has sailed. Check out the Antifada at patreon.com/Antifada. Jamie Show and Matt, what's happening on TMBS?
Yeah, tonight on TMBS, Joshua Kahn Russell and Ben Burgess, so some TMBS regulars. We're going to be talking with Ben about his sort of like retrospective on John Ronson's about half-decade-old book, So You've Been Publicly Shamed, and what that sort of, I think it doesn't mention cancel culture in that book, but it's a book sort of about cancel culture. And surprise, it doesn't even mainly come from the left, but we're going to be talking about that tonight.
Right. Also, folks, don't forget shop.majorityreportradio.com. We've got a bunch of swag. We got new stuff coming soon. And I'm working on, I know we'll talk about this tomorrow, the 10-year anniversary stuff. All right, quick break. I'm going to try and do the phones, but we were having a little bit of phone problem, but I will set up the IM right now. And maybe I won't even do the phones today because we'll try it tomorrow. You can IM the show at majorityapp.com. Pick up the app, and that will be that. See you in the fun half. Left is best. Jamie and I may have a disagreement.
Yeah, you can't just say whatever you want about people just because you're rich.
I have an absolute right to mock them on YouTube.
He's up there buggy whipping like he's the boss.
I am not your employer.
You know, I'm tired of the negativity.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to upset you. You're nervous? You're a little bit upset? You're riled up?
Yeah, maybe you should rethink your defense of that, you fucking idiots.
We're just going to get rid of you.
All right.
But dude. You want to smoke this joint?
Yes.
Do you feel like you are a dinosaur?
That's some good shit.
Exactly. I'm happy now.
It's a win-win.
It's a win-win-win.
Oh, hell yeah.
Now listen to me. 2, 3, 4, 5 times. 847-906-501-457. 2, 38, 56, 27. 1/2. 5 eighths. 3.9 billion.
Wow.
He's the ultimate math nerd.
Don't you see?
Why don't you get a real job instead of spewing vitriol and hatred, you left-wing Limbaugh?
Everybody's taking their dumb juice today.
Come on, Sammy.
Dance, dance, dance.
Ooh.
I had my first post-coital scene with a woman. I'm hoping to add more moves to my repertoire. All I have is the dip and the swirl.
Fine, we can double dip.
Yes, this is a perfect moment.
No.
Wait, what?
You make under $1 million a year. You're scum. You're not paying.
Excuse me? Fuck you, you fucking liberal elite. I think you belong in jail.
Thank you for saying that, Sam. You're a horrible, despicable person.
All right, gonna take a quick break. I want to take a moment to talk to some of the libertarians out there. Take whatever vehicle you want to drive to the library. What you're talking about is jibber jabber.
Classic. I'm feeling more chill already.
Good. Donald Trump can kiss all of our asses.
Hey, Sam. Hey, Andy. You guys ready to do some evil?
Hitler was such an idiot.
That guy might be a Nazi.
Agree.
No.
Death to America.
You.
Yes.
Wow.
Wow, that's weird. No way. Unbelievable. This guy's got a really good hook. Throw our hands up.
Ooh.
Wow.
But Sam, I gotta get off.
No worries. Let's. I want to just flesh this out a little bit. I mean, look, it's a free speech issue. If you don't like me,
Hey! Shut up!
Thank you for calling into the Majority Report. Sam will be with you shortly.
We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Of course, everybody's like giving me lessons on how to say Nomiki's name.
All different too.
Nomiki is not with us today. She's I don't know. Let's take some IMs, shall we? If there's time, you guys should also play the tape from August, where Trump doesn't understand why Woodward weighs the summer COVID surge is more important than the summer stock rebound. I haven't heard that. Did you that? Josh from Tucson. I just realized last month I passed my 2-year anniversary being a Majority Report subscriber. Thank you for that. Keep up the hard work, and Kyle, we're rooting for you. I'm currently listening to People Know on Audible. I just finished Zephyr's Teacher's new book. Great. I didn't get my trumpets for my last IM of the day yesterday, by the way. It says science people don't care about your feelings. By the way, for listeners who deal with QAnoners, I've engaged with a few and suggested they research Noam Chomsky after talking about distrust of main news networks, and there was a fair level of interest. I have the energy. I'd love to discuss Citizens United with them and see if we can agree that evil cabals billionaires shouldn't be funding politics. Though I've had to explain an aerosol is just a term for suspended particles for being and not just a term for a terrorist attack while discussing COVID. Being a science person is exhausting these days. Science person. Jez Gargelet, have you been affected by this change in SAG-AFTRA insurance? I'm hearing a lot of well-known actors who think we're solid members talking about getting screwed in the middle of a pandemic. So it made me especially nervous for someone like you who's only still marginally in show business anymore. It is, in the meantime, I'm not. One of the changes, I don't want to get into that, but they changed like what the spouse situation is. And that situation had changed for me anyway. So sitting here in Kansas City, I had no idea populism, it's entomology here. Great interview, says Hot Topic. Elliot, when it comes to talking heads, speak to the signature factual with mail-in factor. No one seems to talk about how a simple signature prevents fraud. If there's any discrepancy in the signatures, they call you to confirm and the signature problems are less than 2%. I once called and asked someone to describe my on-file signature. The person described it right down to an overhead loop that starts from the forging any signature would be amazing, let alone a dead person's signature. It would take a close relative just to have the balls to think about it. I will tell you that I have gotten a call about my signature in the past on absentee ballots. Chris from Taiwan, not only do we need to abolish ICE, we need a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, public trials for their crimes against humanity. Run PMC, does it feel like the deaths from coronavirus is being memory holed already? It seems like there's no recognition that nearly 200,000 people have died and what it means outside of clapping hand tweets. I agree.
It's sort of like we just were adjusted or normalized to as many deaths and hospital visits as we could handle. And then we're like, well, let's keep it moving.
I saw some report that people are just not clicking on COVID stories anymore at all. And, you know, one of the things I think is going to come out of this 10, 15 years from now is getting some type of like broader social science perspective on the way that people deal with these type of things. The 1918 pandemic was completely memory hold. Completely. And I wonder if that's not just like some type of defense mechanism. I don't know. I don't know if it was because it got subsumed with the World War I. I don't know. But let's get on to the insane guy who's our president. This is I saw some there was a document. I don't know who put it out. I gotta check it. And I'll talk more about this tomorrow, but saying that from a talking point perspective, shouldn't talk about the idea of Trump cheating in the election or, possible, disruptions to the election process and this and that, because it discourages people from voting. Now, I happen to think that our audience, frankly, if I had an audience of 10 million people, I might contemplate like, I should be careful about that. In my mind, there's no one in our audience who is not going to either vote or not going to not vote willfully, right? Like there's no, like people aren't going to be afraid to vote. They're either like not voting because they feel adamant that like I can't vote for Joe Biden or whatever it is. And I hope there's not many of those people. And my assumption is that the rest of you are going to vote because you understand. I mean, why would you listen to this program? And just sort of be lackadaisical about it. I can understand why you would listen to this program and be like adamant, like I don't vote. I listen to this program to learn about politics, and I'm engaged and I'm an activist and I'm involved, and and I don't believe in electoral politics. I mean, I would have an argument with that, but I wouldn't be shocked. But like casual, like I listen to that program every day. I'm just casually involved in politics. or interested in what the future of our society is. So if I can vote, if it's convenient, I'll vote. I don't think we have any listeners like that. So I'm not concerned about scaring you away from voting, because in my mind, this stuff makes it more urgent that you need to vote. And, I've been listening to the right wingers for a long time, and they all get on the page like this. And Mark Levin, Roger Stone saying the exact same thing within a day or two of each other. Donald Trump saying the same thing. This lunatic, Mark Caputo. Let me read this story, actually, maybe we'll save it for tomorrow. Let's go to the commander-in-chief. This is the president of the United States. He is on with Fox and Friends this morning. He is completely out of his mind. We'll take this. I guess, in order. Here is Donald Trump pushing the narrative that this election is going to be illegitimate if he loses.
That state easily. But the one thing he can't beat, if they cheat on the ballots. Now, he'll cheat on the ballots. I have no doubt about it. This is the same man who's in charge of the ballots. So you have the unsolicited ballots or the solicited, the governor.
Pause it.
The governor's in charge.
Pause it. We are talking about the governor of Nevada. And I guess because Nevada is going to be mail-in, he's saying that they're going to cheat on this. I'm not even 100% sure. But listen, keep going.
I have no doubt about it. This is the same man who's in charge of the ballots. So you have the unsolicited ballots or the solicited, the governor. The governor's in charge. They followed us everywhere they had a site. My people told me they've never seen anything like it. Every place we had a big open site, outdoor site, which is great. It would have been perfect. They said no. So we had to go someplace. We ended up in a very big building. But I would have preferred being outside like we were the night before. But the night before, it was amazing that we got it because they were trying to break it up. This is what we're up against. This is what's happening, and it's a disgrace. Right. And you're going to see something with these ballots. You're going to see corruption like you've never seen. You're going to see a rigged election. This guy would do anything, and he's in charge of the ballots.
But you have an attorney general.
Governor with that kind of a take in charge of the ballots?
I'm curious as to what Kilmeade was saying was the good news there about the attorney general. The attorney general in Nevada, or was he talking about Bill Barr? They are mad, and they must have in polling that shows they're going to get wiped in Nevada, and they're mad because they had an indoor rally and the Nevada governor spoke out against it. Roger Stone is claiming the same thing, that the Nevada governor is going to cheat on the ballots. We'll play that in a bit. Well, let's play that now. Since Donald Trump, I mean, this is, they are coordinating their message. I don't know if they sit there and go like, this is what the plan is for this week, or just like Roger Stone's like, Donald, listen to me on InfoWars yesterday. Play this. This is Roger Stone like 2 days ago on InfoWars.
But I still honestly believe in my heart that if only voters who are entitled to legally vote because they are citizens vote, and they vote once, Donald Trump will be elected president. The ballots in Nevada on election night should be seized by federal marshals and taken from the state. They are completely corrupted. No votes should be counted from the state of Nevada if that turns out to be the provable case. We can prove voter fraud in the absentees right now. Send federal marshals to the Clark County Board of Elections, Mr. President. It's all there.
Roger Stone, that was my next question. What does Trump need to do with 53 days out? Because it's clear they think they can steal it. They've said they're going to oppose it. Big tech, Zuckerberg says they're going to launch it for weeks or months, hold it up. I mean, that's their plan. How do we counter this?
The president should call former Congressman Bob Barr and he should ask him, he should appoint him a special counsel. He should order his appointment as a special counsel with the specific task of forming an election day operation using the FBI, federal marshals, and Republican state officials across the country to be prepared to file legal objections and, if necessary, to physically stand in the way of criminal activity.
What?
Exactly. And the whole Democrat strategy is if federal officers or locals enforce election law, that's criminal and that's blocking votes when they have bombed the country with 80 million basically fake ballots to gum things up on purpose. And the Clintons are now, as you said, chortling, admitting that they have a military plan once the election is in question to remove Trump. Is that wishful thinking, or do they have a small cadre and they're trying to act powerful? What's the plan?
I don't want to overplay the facts here, but if someone will study the president's authority in the Insurrection Act and in his ability to impose martial law, if there's widespread treating, he will have the authority to arrest Zuckerberg, to arrest Tim Cook, to arrest the Clintons, to arrest anybody else who can be proven to be involved in illegal activity. I do not advocate preventive detention, but people who commit crimes and think they can continue to get away with it because we have two-tier justice are just wrong.
Well, let's be clear. When we have a Chi-Com-backed big tech running slave camps in China, belligerently trying to steal the election, and they've pressed the attack and they won't stop, they believe in a game of chicken. They're about to win. I've never heard you, and I've seen you back 40 years ago on TV.
Okay, we don't need to hear any more of this. Okay, so basically, they are mad at the Nevada governor because he signed a bill mandating mail-in voting, so everybody will get ballots. And the only thing I can imagine is the real problem why they are so upset about this is not so much that they feel they're going to lose Nevada, because they lost Nevada last time, and I don't, maybe they had polling that they thought they could win. I don't know. I think the fear is they're afraid that other states may follow this lead, or they want to just use this as the premise that mail-in balloting, or that just balloting in general, is fraudulent. And you've got, Roger Stone, like I say, we had the president. Roger Stone said that 3 days ago about Nevada. You have the president on Fox and Friends saying it today.
Roger Stone has a big Nixon face on his back, and it's very Nixonian to project the way that they basically project the election fraud onto the Democrats. That's why Nixon tapped like the Watergate offices. It's because he was convinced in his mind, or at least he said he was convinced in his mind, that LBJ bugged him the exact same way. It's always, I'm just reacting to what the evil Democrats are doing.
It's exactly what the Swift voting was. I mean, it's a long time strategy. George Bush went AWOL from the reserves. And so the Democrats thought, oh, well, this would be a way to highlight that. And the Republicans go right as a vet. And this is a similar strategy. Although, the problem is that Roger Stone has the president's ear. And when he starts talking about sending around these federal troops, I mean, this is something that I've been, talking about for the past couple of weeks that I'm a little concerned about. That these feds that they're bringing in, these unmarked cars, like, are they just going to sit around on election day? Bill Barr's not going to use them, send them to, I don't know, a county in Wisconsin, a county in Pennsylvania, Macomb County in Michigan. Who knows? I don't know. But it's disturbing. Here is let's Ducey and what's this one about? What's this number 5?
That's the very end of it. Is pretty funny because Kilmeade looks very.
Is it worth playing any of these other ones? I don't know.
I mean, yeah.
Well, let's play number 2 because again, this is all part of it. That undercut the media. You can't trust what they're going to report. Why aren't they calling Donald Trump president on election day, even though we know results? Pennsylvania, I think, is one of those states where they cannot start counting until election day. We're not going to hear results for a couple of days, unless Joe Biden wins overwhelmingly in in-person voting, because more than likely the absentee or mail-in ballots will be predominantly Democratic, or at least a majority. But here is Donald Trump needing reminding from Steve Doocy that the media is the enemy.
And it's really, much of it is absolutely the enemy of the people. And they see it. And nobody said it like I say it, but I say it loud and clear. It's the enemy of the people. It's whether it's the New York Times, Washington Post, or the networks. Think of it. You get nominated for.
Well, Mr. President, we're part of the press, too. Are we the enemy of the people?
No, you're not. No, I would say about 20% isn't. We don't have the enemy of the people all over, fortunately, but we have tremendous disparity. You have tremendous unfairness in the press. It's I came up with a name a long time ago. It's the fake news media.
Those cowards, right?
Just pathetic, Doocy. I mean, we've seen Doocy do some pathetic
Are we
stuff.
Enemies of the people?
Like he tried to put a funny little voice on it, like, what about us? But
yeah, and he's putting up his scrunched face. He's like these people are cowards. These are
this is bootlicking.
Oh my God.
Elite bootlicking.
Oh my God. And can you imagine? I mean, Donald Trump is, somewhat inept, and I think I think there's scholars who would call him pre-fascist, right? And people can argue about that, but he's but can you imagine, let's say, a Tom Cotton, who maybe has similar inclinations as Trump, who is smarter and maybe more ruthless? I mean, can you imagine how different Steve Doocy's reaction would be if Trump was even more vicious and horrible? I mean, it's possible. It's certainly, I think he is the most sort of nakedly fascistic president of my lifetime, but it's possible to get worse. Can you imagine what their reaction, how different it would be? I would say it would be not different at all.
Nope.
Just as bootlicking, maybe a slightly less, a little bit of tell. Let's go back. Doocy's look on his face after he says, we're the media. We're the media too, aren't we? We're good. Well, 20% are good. Look at the look on Doocy's face.
Here, 1 second.
It's him trying to make, sort of signal I'm actually, I have some semblance of slight integrity. You can tell by the way I'm scrunching up my nose.
And it's really, much of it is absolutely the enemy of the people.
Kill me. They're all
They
afraid.
see it. And nobody said it like I say it, but I say it loud and clear. It's the enemy of the people. It's whether it's the New York Times, Washington Post.
They're all just sort of looking down, embarrassed about themselves.
Well, Mr. President, we're part of the press too. Are we the enemy of the people?
You know what that reminds me of is being on this show sometimes. Is somebody going to say something if somebody misspeaks? You wonder if somebody else is going to come in and correct them, and then Deuce is fine. Ainsley and Brian clearly aren't going to say hey, exactly. Enemy of the people. I guess it's on me to do it.
Right. And he's but it's so whiny and cloying. What about us? But look at his face after Trump says, well, 20% of you are okay. Good.
Okay.
Whether it's the New York Times, Washington Post, or the networks. Think of it. You get nominated for.
Well, Mr. President, we're part of the press too. Are we the enemy of the people?
No, you're not. No, I would say about 20% isn't. We don't have the enemy.
Look at this. Stop it right there. Pause it right there. Pause it right there. Look at him. Look at him. He's got the look of concern on there a little bit. Just look at his eyebrows scrunched down. I guess I tried. Hey guys, how about jumping in? Kilmeade's just looking down at his tie. You scumbags. Unbelievable.
I guess
these are people, honestly, these are people who if they thought that they would get a promotion to turn in their neighbors, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. That type of thing. They're the first ones. That ilk.
Let's just take on the end of this interview here where Trump proposes that they do this every week.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So this is This is at the end of the interview. This is number 5, right?
Yeah.
Okay. This is pretty good. How about you guys just officially be, because this is the only show I like to go on because you guys are weak.
Yeah, I think Kilmeade picks it up because of an earlier suggestion, but watch Kilmeade's body language here. It's very funny.
Yeah. Mr. President, I think you broke a lot of news this morning. Thank you very much for starting your day with Fox and Friends.
Thank you. Okay, it's been great.
We'll do it every week. We're going to do it every week.
I look forward to it. Yeah, we're going to do it every week. Every Monday, I think they said. And if we can't do it on a Monday, we'll do it on a Tuesday like we did today.
Sounds good. Mr. President, thank you very much. You may want to do it every week, but Fox is not committed to that. We're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. And Joe Biden, as well, is always welcome to join us for 46 minutes, like we just did with the president. All right.
Oh, my God. Wait a second. So what happened was that Kilmeade basically was talking out of school, right? Like, you can't, like, hey, wait a second. We're doing it's like Fridays with the mayor, and they're just trying to make it seem like they're fair and balanced. So what happened there is that somebody got into Ducey's ear.
Yeah.
The producers in their ears. And they're saying, no, back off that. That's not public. We're not supposed to say it's an agreement. Remember, we're not working with the White House. We're media.
I missed how he stresses Biden is welcome at the end of the story.
Yeah, exactly. Here, take it again.
We'll do it every week.
Look at Kilmeade.
We'll do it every week.
Kilmeade.
I look forward to it. Yeah, we're going to do it every week. Every Monday, I think they said. And if we can't do it on a Monday, we'll do it on a Tuesday like we did today.
Sounds good. Mr. President, thank you very much. You may want to do it every week, but Fox is not committed to that. We're going to take it on a case-by-case basis. And Joe Biden, as well, is always welcome to join us for 47 minutes, like we just did with the president. All right. Donald Trump, President of the United States. He's now...
Wow. That is weird. 47 minutes he was on for today?
Yeah.
The President of the United States just gave a 47-minute interview on Fox and Friends?
It's going to be a weekly thing.
It's not like he's got a lot to do. It's not like there's a pandemic going on or that they're, floating the idea of like, we have a reason to attack Iran now. Do you know that we didn't talk about it too much. I'll talk about it more tomorrow. But the supposedly like one cousin of someone within our intelligence agencies, supposedly, or something like that. Like the sourcing was like a person familiar with a person who's familiar with one intelligent assessment says that Iran has plans to assassinate our ambassador to South Africa, who is like she's a pocketbook designer or something that got appointed to the ambassadorship in South Africa. And anybody who's has any knowledge about Iran apparently has written like, why Iran has a good relationship with South Africa. Why would they assassinate the ambassador there? It's not the way that you do these things. Like, you don't do that within an allied country because then you implicate the allied country. You do it at a place where you don't care. And it's like, what is the idea that this ambassador was equal to the Soleimani, supposedly it was retribution for Soleimani's killing, that would happen there. That seems far-fetched. And there's some concern that like, this is a predicate for an October surprise. I mean, if people don't think that like anything in the playbook that Trump's going to do, but he's got 45 minutes in the morning. See, this way I don't have to watch it. I have two choices. I can watch somebody else on Fox and Friends, or I can be on Fox and Friends. It's my only two choices for that time in the morning. So I might as well do it because I'm going to be there anyways. We just live in a world of insanity. I don't know what else to tell you, folks. What is this? Clip number 7. Is this? Where was this on? This is the.
It's I think a meeting with California. Let's see, I got it right here. California Secretary of National Resources meeting with Trump. I'm not sure exactly where they're doing this.
Okay, let's play this clip. As you know, 6 of the California's worst forest fires in its history, 6 of the 20 have happened this year. And we have millions of acres now on fire. The air quality is as far south as at least LA, I think, is just atrocious. Up in Oregon, the sky is orange. Apparently that was like that in San Francisco too. Here's Donald Trump talking to California Secretary for National Resources.
As the governor said, we've had temperatures explode this summer. You may have learned that we broke a world record in the Death Valley, 130 degrees.
Oh, pause it for 1 second. Pause it for 1 second. This is Trump when he went to California.
Record in the Death Valley, 130 degrees. But even in greater LA, 120 plus degrees. But I think we want to work with you to really recognize the changing climate and what it means to our forests, and actually work together with that science. That science is going to be key, because if we ignore that science and sort of put our head in the sand and think it's all about vegetation management, we're not going to succeed together protecting Californians.
Okay, it'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Well, I don't think science knows, actually.
I mean, can you believe that shit?
So irritating.
I don't think science knows. I know. It's going to get cooler.
The smugness, because he knows that guy's not going to, raise his voice or get angry in that situation. So it's like, I think the science, I don't know.
And that guy laughing, I think, was that Chad Wolf, whatever his name is, he's an illegal, incidentally. Chad Wolf is an illegal. The court found that he is illegally serving as Department of Homeland Security. He's an illegal, that guy. But he was the one without the mask, too, I think, at that table. It's insane. He's just sitting there laughing at the science as the states burn. 120 degrees in LA the other day.
You have to, in the areas where there's terrible air, Raygun was telling me that, like, as long as you don't keep your front door open if you have to go outside, your house can kind of stay okay as long as, like, the windows are sealed and that sort of stuff.
Horrible. I mentioned earlier that both Donald Trump and Roger Stone on the same page in terms of what they need. Like, I think Roger Stone's quote was like, I don't believe in preventative jailing or something like, or internment, but we may need to use the Insurrection Act to, I don't know, arrest Zuckerberg after the election, or Clinton, still on Clinton, and others after the election. Weird that idea seems to be floating around out there. Here's Mark Levin, very good friends with Sean Hannity, who is, as you know, one of the president's advisors, informal advisors.
The unreality of the left. They try to make it our reality. And I have a sneaking suspicion, and no, I have no firsthand knowledge, but a sneaking suspicion, should our president be reelected, God willing, that he will dust off the Insurrection Act that was first passed by the Jeffersonian Republicans and used by Jefferson and used by so many presidents since Jefferson. And he will have to use it to put down the enemy. The enemy is Antifa. The enemy is Black Lives Matter. And the enemy is anybody who's going to use rioting, arson, looting, violence against our country to try and overthrow our country. Those are traitors. That's treasonous. It's amazing. They're pulling down Confederate statues, or were. Not anymore, because Trump put his foot down. No more statues. Don't pull down Catholic statues. Don't pull down Abraham Lincoln and George Washington. No, you're not allowed to do that, or you're going to the federal prison for 10 years. All of a sudden, okay, oops. He's not like the Democrat mayors where we can do damn near anything we want. Somebody wrote, it's not easy to do this when you have hostile mayors and governors. No, it's not easy. Saving the country is never easy. But great presidents step up, and that's exactly what they do. And it wouldn't be hard to put down these punks. It would not be hard to put down these punks. They run around in masks because they're frauds. They cover their faces because they're frauds.
Part of it is also they're trying not to spread coronavirus, and also they don't want to breathe in the tear gas and the mace.
Or be subjected to, the surveillance that is always going on in this country.
That's part of the reason. That's a big, those three are the big reasons why they wear the masks. But the idea that you've got Levin and Stone talking about the Insurrection Act within days of each other, I don't know. I don't know if that's actually Donald Trump's plan, or is it more just like they think this is the way in which you create. I've used this example many times before, but why the Democrats had to impeach Donald Trump. By moving to impeachment, it signals that what Trump is doing is wrong. Like the idea of a reaction shot in a film, right? Subject does something, it's the reaction shot that gives an indication to the audience on how this should be received. On some level, that's what this is about. If they're talking about the Insurrection Act to their audience believes like, oh my God, what's going on in this country? To the point where you have people staying in their homes in Oregon as wildfires are coming towards them because they're afraid of Antifa coming and, stealing their house or something. This is the same game plan, but I don't know that it's going to work. 2018, do you remember 2018 where there were people in Minnesota who were afraid of their lake houses being overrun by the caravan?
Yeah. Lake Minnetonka is now called Lake MS-13.
I mean, do we remember how just wall to wall the caravan coverage was? And the idea being it was the caravan that was coming to get you. And now it's a new thing. It's, BLM and Antifa are coming to get you. This is how they do. This is how they do. So to contrast, Donald Trump assuring people it's going to get cooler. Don't worry. The science doesn't know everything. Joe Biden has not signed on to the Green New Deal, but he does have a fairly decent starting point for what his policy is in terms of climate change. And this is the one area, if I had to guess to what Joe Biden's going to do and what a Democratic Senate and House would do if they have that. And this is obviously subject to them getting rid of the filibuster, which I think they're going to have to do, hopefully on day one, but maybe hopefully on day one. I think you're going to see a restoration of Voting Rights Act, Section 5. I think you're going to see statehood for D.C. And then I think the first thing they're going to do is I think it's going to be a major climate legislation. And it's a good starting point. I would like to see more, but it's better than it's going to get cooler. Here is Joe Biden talking about climate change on the West Coast at the Delaware Museum of Natural History.
Donald Trump warns that integration is threatening our suburbs. It's ridiculous. But you know what is actually threatening our suburbs? Wildfires are burning the suburbs in the West. Floods are wiping out suburban neighborhoods in the Midwest. Hurricanes are imperiling suburban life along our coast. If we have 4 more years of Trump's climate denial, how many suburbs will be burned in wildfires? How many suburban neighborhoods will have been flooded out? How many suburbs will have been blown away in superstorms? If you give a climate arsonist 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised if we have more America ablaze? If you give a climate denier 4 more years in the White House, why would anyone be surprised when more of America is underwater? We need a president who respects science, who understands that the damage from climate change is already here. Unless we take urgent action, it will soon be more catastrophic.
I mean, his proposal, like I say, is fairly robust. It's not near where the Green New Deal is. But there is at least some encouragement. I mean, look, it's marginally better. There is going to be more massive wildfires. There is going to be more massive hurricanes. We're going to lose all those things he was talking about. We're going to lose. That is already baked into the cake. The cake is already baked on that. The question is, can we mitigate the damage that's going to happen 10 years from now if we start next year? Can we mitigate some of the damage that's going to happen 30 years from now if we start next year? And it's going to get progressively worse over the course of those 30 years. I mean, much of this is already written, our future. It's just going to be how sort of ultimately, how catastrophic will it be is really the question at this point.
Yeah, the future climate response isn't going to be driven by the individuals in power like Biden or Trump. It's going to be by events like these massive things. And then the extent to the response and the reaction is going to be the coalition behind them. And you want the Democrat in there besides the Republican. This is, again, simple.
Exactly. And it's really going to be a question of like, how strong will the opposition to the demands be? That's it. Right? I mean, Donald Trump, he is going the absolute opposite direction that we should be going in. The absolute opposite direction. The question is like, how much of a fight can Joe Biden put up if there is a will from many people in his quarters? And that's just the bottom line. I mean, but make no mistake about it. This is, I know the ultimate irony is that I was just reading up on, obviously in Wisconsin, the Green Party didn't get on there. Clinton lost Wisconsin by 20,000 votes. Jill Stein got something like, 30 or 40,000 votes there. I don't know if any of those votes, if she wasn't on the ballot, if any of them would have went to Clinton. Who knows? I can tell you that Al Gore lost Florida by less than 600 votes, if I remember correctly. And Ralph Nader won, I think, about 80 or 90,000 votes in Florida. I'm not sure. I think off the top of my head. Al Gore, pretty strong on climate change. Maybe not in terms of you seeing it as, his response may have been a little more narrowly tailored. But 20 years, what would you pay now? Yeah. I mean, pay in terms of like willing to give up in terms of aspirations for fundamentally restructuring our economy, to be able to go back 20 years from now and say, I want a president who is going to begin to diminish the power of fossil fuels by, inhibiting their value in the marketplace. Right? Or will encourage, through neoliberal mechanisms, making solar power and, giving solar power a 10-year head start relative to the Obama administration.
Yeah. Like with Al Gore would have just done all the sort of market reforms for climate change that Obama was able to like low-hanging fruit do when he got into office. And if Gore could have done that earlier, then Obama would have had to go farther than that.
Right. I mean, the idea is that you either you diminish the power of these institutions, and then they have less power. Right. I mean, like you undermine them. You soften them up for the fight. I don't know.
Should take on that Varney clip about this teleprompter thing.
Yes.
Too.
So here's Stuart Varney. I mean, I can't even believe this guy can function anymore. Talk about Joe Biden. I mean, here's Stuart Varney in a very, very brittle glass house, reading from a teleprompter, talking about Joe Biden reading from a teleprompter.
Who writes Joe Biden's scripts? He's almost always reading from a teleprompter. So who writes what he reads? This is important because we want a president who is in control of his own campaign and his own policies. Nobody puts words in President Trump's mouth, certainly not. But Joe?
Pause it for 1 second.
Figure.
How do they, like, how stupid are the people who are watching this? Does Stuart Varney think they are? Donald Trump, he reads his teleprompter and then he stops and he goes like, can you believe that? Like he indicates almost every speech, like, this is almost the first time I've ever seen this. I didn't know it was 200 million. 200 million. That seems like a lot, doesn't it, everybody? You can't, like, it's not only that Donald Trump read from his teleprompter, it's almost like he invites everybody, come in, take a look at what I'm reading here. This is unbelievable. But go ahead.
We want a president who is in control of his own campaign and his own policies. Nobody puts words in President Trump's mouth, certainly not. But Joe, he seems like a figurehead, controlled from behind the scenes. Case in point, Biden's weekend silence. As the president barnstormed through the West, Joe stayed home, saying very little. Democrats got worried. Bernie Sanders urged him to get out and make a left turn. And on Monday, he did. He called the president a climate arsonist. Strong stuff, and right in line with Bernie's Green New Deal extremism. The suspicion is that Bernie and AOC fed the climate arsonist line into his teleprompter, and Joe dutifully came out of his house and read the script. This is something Biden voters should worry about. The Democrats have put him forward as the smiling, moderate face of the party, but behind the scenes lurks Bernie, the squad, and next in line, Kamala Harris. This is the woke crowd, and they are the power in the party.
Yeah. Alexandria, I just got a new plan of how we can do socialism in this country, and don't ask me where I got it from. Okay, I'll tell you. It's from the movie Anchorman, where they put "Go fuck yourself, San Diego" in the teleprompter, and he just says it. And I think if we can get access to Joe's teleprompter, we can see a lot of movement on our policy sets.
So Kamala Harris gave me instructions to give to you to read into Joe Biden's ear when he gives the climate speech. So this is what Kamala has told me to tell you, to tell Biden to do. Oh my God. I'm worried as a Biden voter. I'm very concerned. First of all, I think it's a waste of Bernie Sanders' time to be taking out stuff in a teleprompter.
He loves doing media, though. So
he loves
scripting stuff out.
That is the one thing about Bernie Sanders that people don't talk about. The guy starting like literally like 30 years ago, he was obsessed with cue cards. He would just, for random people, random politicians, Bernie Sanders was always like, let me do the cue cards. And then he developed it into just typing out the teleprompter.
You think I stay on message just because of my brain? No, I invented a machine that keeps you on message.
It's just like, how does Stuart Varney, how does any of them, they go out there and they just sort of like, Donald Trump is the most teleprompter based, and they did this with Obama. He's reading from a teleprompter. That was a huge scandal. Rivaled almost the tan suit. And they were on this. He's on a teleprompter. Donald Trump is the most teleprompter based politician it's the least seamless on some level. I mean, on some level, he's like basically admitting he's reading from a teleprompter, because that's what he's like, look, will you look at this? He's
2
pointing
Corinthians.
to the teleprompter.
2 Corinthians. Oh, did I write this?
2 Corinthians, the Bible, Corinthians. As Corinthians said, it is Yo-Semites.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen, how do you spell Corinthians?
I had to type this in, Yo-Semites. Jared Kushner went on NBC News to talk to Savannah Guthrie. He was quoted by Woodward as purging some of the idiots in the Trump administration. I wonder. I don't think they're finished with that job. Go ahead.
The Woodward book, you are quoted at length as well in it, and one caught my eye. You said the most dangerous people around the president are, quote, overconfident idiots. And then it quotes you as saying, we've gotten rid of a lot of the overconfident idiots in the administration. Who are you referring to?
Yeah, so he actually mischaracterizes who I was referring to. Obviously, the people that we had, some people from the campaign who were in there who were obviously always trying to tell the president with confidence without the real facts. Look, when we got to Washington, President Trump had never done this before, and I think it took him a while to figure out who are the right people that he wanted to have around him in his administration. But I think over time, he's really figured out who was with him, who was really not on his agenda, and he's been able to use his agenda to help the American people.
So
President
you were
Trump
not
redid
referring
all.
You were. I just want to be clear, because you just said
Woodward
says you were referring to General Mattis, Tillerson, and Gary Cohen, an economic advisor. You're saying that's not who you meant.
No, that wasn't clear. And again, he's got tapes of everything. I have tapes of everything. So that was never implied in that regard. But what I will say is that President Trump now has phenomenal people around him, people who agree with his agenda. He did a trade deal with.
Yes, I needed people around me. Who wants to wet their beak.
So Bannon, I guess. Is Bannon probably who he's saying he was talking about?
Maybe. I don't know that Bannon and Kushner. I don't know. Well, at one point we'll find out. But it was probably, I don't know. There's been so many millions, like literally dozens of people who have left that administration.
He was the guy who's supposed to do peace in the Middle East, right? As we're speaking about overconfident idiots.
Still time.
Yeah. Okay.
There's still time. All right, let's take some IMs and then we'll get out of here. Barrett Home 2. Sam, have you shared your opinion on the socialists and communists that have been targeting Steve Kenneth Bonnell, a.k.a. Destiny? I find these attacks on a fellow progressive quite problematic in many ways. I have no idea of what you're talking about.
I mean, Destiny upset a lot of people with some comments he made on Kenosha. I know. I don't know. I didn't look into it, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I haven't followed it. Baron sanitation member. Bob Woodward was one of the president's men for several months. Train boy, I see what you did there with the pre-roll ads selling pre-rolls. Very clever. Thank you. I did not mean that.
I did not. Yeah, I didn't.
No, I did not see that. Nicole, Sam, I was talking politics at a small dinner party the other night, never a good idea, and mentioned Obama calling Buttigieg to drop out of the primaries after South Carolina. Afterwards, I looked for reporting to confirm this. I remember hearing it, but not reading it, but only saw articles reporting that Obama called after Pete dropped out. Am I wrong? I think Pete may have dropped out, but some of that reporting came later, but he clearly said now is the time to use your leverage. So I don't know if Pete dropped out because of Obama called him or if he endorsed Biden because of that. I'd have to go back. But what are you having a small dinner party for? Are people having dinner parties? I hope it was outside. Gigi Palin, is it possible that the traditional understanding of populism and how it was so intimately tied to labor has been lost as technology and automation advances greatly outpace advances in worker rights? The same way that negotiations over private health care are futile in relation to use as leverage when bargaining, it seems like the more atomized the individuals within a system, the harder it is to apply 20th century populist ideals on a 21st century global capitalist economy. Thomas Frank felt as though the middle class would last forever in the 70s. Could it be that populism as we knew it now only has so much life in it in comparison to the hyper-aggressive trajectory of modern capitalism, i.e., how do we modernize the framework? I'm not 100% sure exactly where you're coming from, but there is, I have issues around that too. And that is why, like, I still can't fully grasp what, if populism was a package of policies, if it was an ideology, or if it's a tactic. And I think it is, I mean, I get what it was, but, you know, Jennings, I forgot to mention this. You know, Jennings went on to become very, very anti-science. In fact, he was involved.
Is he creationist? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I've always wondered about it.
And I think, you know, Thomas touched on this, that my concern with, you know, the populist policies I subscribe to. But I do think, like, I think we are living in a slightly different era where, you know, we don't have a significant population of people. We could say workers, but, you know, the thing is, like, when you're talking farmer to farmer, you're using the same vocabulary. You're dealing with the rhythms of the year are the same. You know, I think, like, within industries, you know, but we are very atomized now. And you can talk about, like, well, in the service industry, like, it's just, there's not enough that is specific to the way that people, just by nature of their occupations, by their jobs, or whatever you want to call it, can develop enough of a shared bond that it can work in the way that it did then. I just don't think it was a coincidence. You had everybody, you know, like, you know, I mean, I'm up in farm country now, and there is a, you know, farmers, there's a shared language or shared experience. The apples suck this year because everybody knows there was a drought, or the farmers do. But I do think there has to be a modernization of it. And I do think that populism as a tactic is too easily deployed. That Trump is doing it. Obama did a little bit of it. Clinton did it. I'm going to McDonald's. Great. How about helping the people who are serving your food? But he got credit for being, like, he talks to McDonald's guys. You know, people work at McDonald's. He's, you know, he presented himself as of the people. And in some respects, he wasn't anymore, but I mean, he, you know, both our last two Democratic presidents, for whatever reason, it's a coincidence, their fathers were not in their lives. They had hardship as children. And the irony is that in many respects, that's why they succeeded, in part because I think that they had, like, esteem issues. You know, it gets back to that Spitzer thing where Spitzer was like, you know, if I recall correct, I mean, you know, that quote that he gave me was what stays in my head. But he, you know, I think he felt like that Obama had grown up in such a way where he presumed that these people who had gone, you know, were with him at Harvard and these other places, that he believed in the meritocracy. He did not realize that there were other people who were getting a leg up and were there because they were legacies or because they had advantages. He presumed they were there because they were, really meritorious. But a guy who was there because he had the same advantages as these other people could recognize. These people are, I know what advantage, he said, I went to Princeton with them. They were all C students and they cheated at tennis. I find that fascinating, that dilemma that we have. And populism as a veneer and a tactic. And I think, the idea of like being anti-establishment, I think is a little bit problematic as a political project. Because if you win, then you become the establishment. And you can lose sight. Like, I don't care if somehow Joe Biden bumped his head and was like, we need to have a Green New Deal. I don't care that he's part of the establishment. At that point, I'm glad he is, because he's got a better chance of doing it. Like, I just think that like people get caught up in these sort of like labels and these frames that they lose sight of why they were helpful in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, my bias is that whenever, especially even in the interview, Thomas said this, but when populism is useful, it's when it is sort of like a vaguely Marxist framework. And to me, when it's not useful, it's when it obscures that.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to get at with the ideology. Like how, if it is not tethered to at least, and listen, I think you're hard pressed to find somebody who is least interested, at least in the context of what we do here. I mean, I'll read it, but I in actual politics, I am a little bit, I think theory can be as problematic as it is helpful, frankly. But you do need some type of ideological grounding because like you say, populism can obscure, and the ideology doesn't necessarily have to be Marxist, I don't think. I mean, it is, it's hard to sort of like disentangle, some type of Marxist critique of capitalism and, from any critique of capitalism, right? I mean,
he monopolized it.
He monopolized it in many respects. And it's sort of like, I don't know. It's like, you should do some comedy that's untouched by Charlie Chaplin or, Buster Keaton. Well, no, you can't, whatever. Like, our thought about this has been sort of irrevocably influenced. But that's the problem, is that I think that populism in some respects is more of like a tactic, an electoral one, that you can decide, like the specific populism as it was developed at that time. But that, all of those positions that the populists in 1890 were pursuing have basically been addressed. There was a deeper ideological perspective that was behind it, which was, I think, sort of class-based. I don't know that they were that was like, and then you had a lot of those people went to, socialism with the Debs. And then others went off, on the deep end. Greg Abbott's street nemesis. All right, I'm going to take 10 more of these, and that'll be it. I'm really sorry, folks. Sometimes in life, you make one simple mistake, and decades later, it comes back to haunt you. It's been said that you miss 100% of the shots you don't take, but sometimes the circumstances, you getting second place is worse than losing. I'm not sure I know what that is, but Zero Sum Sam, try pronouncing Nomiki's name as if it was written Nomiki. Also think of the emphasis on employee. Let's have an experiment on air. Nomiki. Yeah,
the employee thing might be the employee thing may be the first guide that actually works.
Employee. Yes, because the problem is that this guy or woman wrote it Nomikee, whereas other people are like Nomekey. So that was Nomiki, and this is Nomiki. Okay, I think I got it. Oh my God, I think that's the best spelling of it.
Took about a year.
I think so. Employee. I'm gonna just do that. I'm gonna walk around with this. The Nomiki show. Right? Is that right? Did I say that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Or is it? That's the problem. I forget as soon as I hear it. This little piggy, interesting little tidbit for your American listeners. This past weekend in Quebec, there was a sizable anti-mask protest where people chanted USA and carried Trump and QAnon signs. Also, please stay on the story about the Greens in Wisconsin. A lot of gullible leftists are getting rolled on this and blaming the Democrats. I'll go through it tomorrow. They're just incompetent. They're incompetent. And then they were like, screw it. We're not going to have to pay for our own incompetence. Doctor from New Jersey. I'm not sure if my AM went through this hysterectomy story. Is potentially the scariest moment of the last 4 years. If the implication are borne out by further revelations, we may actually have doctors in detention centers coercively sterilizing migrants. Words like fascism and Nazism are not hyperbolic. Yes. Look,
and in private prisons, so like for profit.
I want to be very careful with this because all we have now is an affidavit from one whistleblower. And I know there's been some other reporting, but I haven't quite seen this borne out. And so I don't want to deny what's in the affidavit, but I also don't want to promote something that has not had substantiation yet. But I agree with you. I tweeted it out last night, the story, but I did without comment because I'm just not sure. Elliot Spitzer. Hey, Sam, just heard your comments on the Christmas party. Can't stand those Princeton jerks. Just a thought. Since Trump cheating on his wife with a porn star was barely an issue, do you think it's time for Spitzer to make a comeback? Anyway, see you at Thanksgiving. Also, thank you for the keeping the after party on the DL. You know what? He was a very nice guy. To me, anyways. And I liked his politics. I think he had some other issues that were pretty sizable. A Square. Sam, really enjoyed your discussion with Frank, but would like to hear his take on how to effectively address the race issue relative to the unions. What are the lessons from the past that can help? Jamie, good convo with Nomiki last week. Zephi, worrying signs in Pittsburgh region for the Biden campaign. The campaign doesn't have an office in Allegheny County. It's had great difficulty getting materials to volunteers, even though staffers are working 80-hour weeks. County Democratic Committee is basically defunct, and when it isn't endorsing Trump Democrats, volunteers are stitching it together, but barely. Mike, the story about the police officer in rural Oregon accusing Antifa of starting fires is even worse than you reported yesterday. He also told the Gather militia how to throw a knife in their hand after shooting them to escape prosecution, especially concerning in light of our president green-lighting extrajudicial killings. Scary times. Two more. Dave Rubin's Mirror Universe counterpart. Star date 3823.7. You know, I'm not just really interested in ideas. Have I mentioned I'm a man and I have a goatee? Any straight people in the audience? Okay, final IM of the day. Delaware, get out and vote today. Well, let me do this. Delaware, get out and vote today for Jessica Rain. F. Chris Coons. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the lie.